Hello everybody, we're going to look at how the snake got poison, and we're going to focus specifically on the protagonist and antagonist part of it so that you understand the difference and what's going on. Welcome back to Language Arts. Do you remember the diamond plot chart? Well, here it is, a blank form. I'm going to review all the different parts, and if you'll notice, there's a couple parts, particularly here, that are new regarding the type of conflict and internal, external. All right, let's look at protagonist. Protagonist is the hero or the character trying to resolve the conflict. He's usually the good guy or she who is trying to do the right thing. It's the one that the reader really wants to succeed and the one that we feel is the most important character. The antagonist is the opposite of that character. It is the character or force working against the protagonist. The antagonist does not always have to be a character. Please note the word force. A force can be something like a sickness, a condition such as the weather, or a physical injury. So the antagonist does not always have to be a character. Just know that these two live in opposites. The protagonist wants one thing, the antagonist usually wants something else, or prohibits the protagonist from getting what he or she wants. Do you remember the formula for the central conflict? Somebody wanted something, but something happens. The somebody is usually the protagonist, but it can also be the antagonist. At this point, I'm going to be going back and forth between two documents. This one is the document that has our definitions on it, and I will explain them step by step. This document is the plot chart. So now we're going to figure out the protagonist, the antagonist, and the central conflict for how the snake got poisoned. Let's look at our definitions. We're looking for a hero, we're looking for an antagonist, something working against that hero, and in order to do that, we have to know the conflict. Well, let's think of our characters. We have the snake, we have the varmints, and we have God. Let's start with the snake, because the snake is in the title. What did the snake want? Well, the snake wanted the varmints to stop trampling on him. Remember that? So snake wanted the varmints to stop trampling on him, but what happened? The but part is where the antagonist comes in. So we have the snake wanted the varmints to stop trampling on him, but what's the problem? What is working against the protagonist? Well, God gives the snake poison to put in his mouth, but unfortunately that poison causes more problem because the snake goes a little nuts with poisoning all the animals. So let's simplify it in this way. The central conflict can be read: the snake wanted the varmints to stop trampling on him, but God gave him poison. Remember, you're just giving the conflict. You're not telling the whole story. That part comes in when we do the resolution. We tell how this central conflict gets resolved when we do the resolution. Now we could word this another way too. We could say the varmints. What did the varmints want? Well, they wanted the snake to stop poisoning all their generations. But what happened? Well, so we can say, so they took their problem to God. Okay? We don't necessarily want to give the ending here, but the point is that the protagonist or the antagonist will be the ones starting here. So now we know our protagonist and antagonist. Let's go ahead and list them. Or is it that easy? So who exactly is the protagonist and the antagonist in this story? Well, as you have hopefully learned in my class so far this year, that there are no real easy answers to these questions. So I'm going to give to you what makes the most sense. First off, we're going to start with the snake. The snake is a protagonist. I went ahead and added the varmints to the protagonist's side. However, you can make the argument that the varmints belong as antagonists because they are working against the protagonist, which we labeled as the snake. But let's look at the picture in its entirety, the whole entire story. Are the snakes and varmints at conflict with each other because of the way that they were set up? Snake didn't have poison, varmints just were doing what they needed to do. And it was God who came and fixed the whole situation by giving the snake both the poison and the rattle. So where does God fit in? Is he the protagonist? Because he does ultimately resolve the conflict. Or is he the antagonist in which he causes the problems to begin with? The lovely part is that he's both. The situation causes this problem. The way that God created these animals to begin with, created the snake to be on the ground in the belly in his dust, caused the problems that started the whole entire conflict. However, he fixed it. So, the true sense, he's more protagonistic than he is antagonistic. So I'm going to list God up here as a protagonist, and instead I'm going to put the situation itself as the antagonist. So here's what I've got now. I went ahead and added an antagonist. I said the situation itself, in that the snake had no means of defense or warning to begin with. And that's really what set the ball rolling. And then it ends, the whole story ends, that is, when he's got a means to both defend himself and warn others so they don't get hurt. That's the end of the story. But again, looking just at the simple definition, you could argue all three of those characters have very differing parts based on your argument, because this is a very much more complex story than just a simple good versus evil. Next, we're going to look at the setting and the point of view. Simply put, the setting is the time and the place. Now let's keep things simple. Time can simply mean past, present. For our story, how the snake got poisoned, what is the setting? What is the time and the place? Well, to figure out time, I suggest looking at the use of, or not, technology. Is there any technology? No, not at all. We also have animals talking with God, trying to figure out a problem. And on top of that, origin myths, which is what we're doing, always occur in the past. So let's write. Since origin myths tell stories about how things came to be, then they are always considered old stories. So origin myths are always going to be in the past. Now, are we done with setting? Nope. We now have to figure out the place. And in order to figure out the place, we're going to have to look at the story itself and get some context clues. So now I'm looking at the story itself, and it starts off with, well, when God made the snake, he put him in the bushes to ornament the ground. But things didn't suit the snake, so one day he got on the ladder and went up to see God. All right, that doesn't really give us much of a clue as to where it happened. So now we have to think kind of logically. Where might snakes and varmints live? Also, from the Zora Neale Hurston video, if you haven't seen it yet, you will know that she centered her stories based on Florida folklore, specifically Black American folklore. So you could say something as specific for the setting as maybe Florida or North America, or because we don't know really at all, and we're just given this brief entrance, could just say something as simple as Earth itself. The story is very vague. If it gave us more specific details, then we would need to be more specific. That's why I said focus on generalities for the purposes of the origin myth. So I'm going to write, for the setting here, Earth. Point of view has two parts. The first is to figure out the person. there are three persons: first, second, and third. Think back to your Spanish classes. In your Spanish classes, when you conjugate verbs, first is always I, me, we, mine, ours. Second is always you or yours. Third is always he, she, it, they, them, etc. First person is a character in the story, speaking from the I point of view. Right now, I am speaking from the first person point of view. If the story is told from the third person point of view, then it would be like this. Mrs. Ramirez is now speaking in the third person. She is referring to herself with she or her, and she will not use pronouns such as I when she is speaking in the third person. Third person also is not a character in the story. It's very important. I put a line through you because second person you point of view stories are very rare. This point of view, the second person, is usually reserved for manuals in which they explain to you what to do. Now you do this, now do that, etc. Stories that we tell are usually in first or in third person. There is one more part to point of view. Knowledge is the second part of point of view. For knowledge, you have to decide, is it omniscient or is it limited? Omniscient really means all-knowing. Omni is all, psi is knowledge. So if it's omniscient, then we know the thoughts and feelings of the main characters. The main characters being the ones. Here's our point of view. It's third person. It's being told by an outsider, not a character in the story. It is omniscient. At first I put limited because we knew the thoughts and feelings of the snake. We knew the thoughts and feelings of the varmints. The snake wants them to stop being trampled. They want to stop being poisoned. They make that clear. And then God thought, wait a minute, we don't know what he wants. We know that he looks towards immensity, but then look at this line down here. I didn't mean for nothing to be stomping you snakes like that. You guys are pretty good with theme. You know that it's a moral or lesson learned. It can also be a human condition. In our story, we've got a lot. Some morals can be life exists in a balance, seek help when things are unfair. Some conditions of human life can be imbalance, harmony, and equality. Lastly, we have resolution. That's how the central conflict ends. Make sure you include both the protagonist and antagonist in the response. So look first back at our central conflict. Our central conflict for this story: the snake wanted the varmints to stop trampling on him, but God gave him poison. So how did this end? Well, the snake got poison and a rattle from God to both protect himself, with the poison, from being trampled, and to warn the rattle others so that they wouldn't have to be poisoned in case they did trample on him. You're looking at every part that you wrote in here needs to be answered in here. And please notice, if we started with the snake, we need to end with the snake. So whatever character you put here, you need to start with here. And make sure you fully explain how that central conflict came to an end. Thank you very much. Y'all have a wonderful day.